Are Liverpool a team in crisis? That is the big question roaming around the football world after two successive defeats against Crystal Palace in the Premier League on March Day 6 of the Premier League by 2-1 at Selhurst Park, and subsequently in the UEFA Champions League against Galatasaray, in which they lost by a goal to nil, courtesy of that penalty by Victor Osimhen. It has come to question Liverpool's credentials, not in terms of competitiveness or the titles that they want to pursue in as far as this campaign is concerned, but the big question is, are Liverpool in crisis at the moment? Personally, I certainly do not want to believe so, because when you look at their report card so far this season, if you only lost 2 games in the 8 played, then that is not a bad report card. In any case, we're talking about a team that is leading the Premier League table. How is that bad? How is that a team in crisis? Then, what shall we say of a team like Manchester United, who find themselves at 14th on the Premier League log, or Chelsea, who are down in 8th, if we are to say that Liverpool are a team in crisis just because they've suffered 2 defeats this season? No draws, just victories and 2 losses. Is there cause for concern? Maybe. Should we be worried that Liverpool are not going to be as good as they were last season? I'm not convinced to believe so. In any case, it has been argued wide and beyond that Liverpool are title Premier League favorites by the virtue of the fact that they are the reigning champions, but also in the UEFA Champions League, when you look at the teams that are playing there, you could say they are one of the favorites by their pedigree, by their performance from last season, especially at the league phase, and notwithstanding that they were knocked out by PSG at the round of 16. You look at them and look at teams like Bayern Munich, teams like PSG, Barcelona, of course Real Madrid, the usual suspects, and think to yourself, yeah, they are among those teams. Why? You look at their squad, and it is a very, very decent squad, one of the very best that there is in the Premier League and in Europe. Is it as balanced as some other teams have it, as maybe Arsenal have it? Maybe not that balanced. But on paper, when you pull out their starting 11, pound for pound, can go to toe-to-toe with any team within Europe, within the Premier League, and win a game of football, not just by, skirmishes of margins, but by very, very convincing margins. And yet, those 2 defeats against Crystal Palace and Galatasaray, have many people questioning their credentials. Their own former defender, Jamie Carragher, is quoted to have called them not top class. If Liverpool are not top class, then I do not know what is. Is Tottenham top class? Should we say Tottenham are top class? Or should we say Crystal Palace are top class just because they are 18 games unbeaten across all competitions dating far back to last season, including beating up against Liverpool in the Community Shield by 3-2 in the post-match penalties that preceded a 2-2 draw? Should we say that suddenly Crystal Palace are a better team than Liverpool? I do not want to be convinced so. I do not want to believe so. Yes, Crystal Palace are third on the Premier League log, and deservedly so. They are the only team that remain unbeaten in the Premier League with 12 points in that third place, having drawn a couple of games. I think as many as 3 games they have drawn so far this season, and then the other have been victories. When you look at their tally of points, 3 draws, 3 victories. So should we argue that suddenly Crystal Palace are a better team than Liverpool because Liverpool have lost 2 games on the spin? I do not want to believe so. Now, let's look at the things in context. The game against Crystal Palace, yes, they were their very best. But remember, they did just enough to stay in that game until they got that equalizer very late on in the game. And had they not sort of lapsed in at the time, they could have walked away with the point on another day. Liverpool have been winning games by small margins very late on so far this season, and we've been saying that is the characteristic of a champion. That is the fight and the never give up attitude. Why has it suddenly changed just because they've lost 1 or 2 games? Now, you could say they've been winning games, even games they haven't looked so well. You go back to that 1-0 victory at Anfield when Dominic Soboslai scores that stunning free kick against Arsenal and they win that game. They did not have the best of performances, but they still found a way to win. Isn't that the hallmark of champions? That even on a bad day, you still go ahead and try and win. Now, nobody believed, not myself, I'm sure not Liverpool fans out there, did they believe at the start of the season that Liverpool were going to go through a Premier League campaign unbeaten. I mean, the last time we saw that was back in 2004 when Arsenal were doing it. Ever since then, we've had teams reach the mark of 100 points, like Manchester City in 2017-2018 Premier League season, and still they did not go a season unbeaten. You will remember Liverpool winning that Premier League title in the 2019-2020 Premier League season, and they still couldn't go unbeaten. We remember Manchester City 2021-2022, very stellar performance, and still did not go a season unbeaten. Because it's not that simple. It is expected that along the course of the season, whereas you may be in the best of form, you may drop points. You may have that lapse. You go back to, I think, when was it? Was it the 2023-2024 Premier League campaign? You remember Arsenal in the second phase of the season when they won 18 out of 19 games, losing only to Aston Villa by 2-0 at the Emirates Stadium. I think Ollie Watkins and Leon Bailey scoring in that game. I mean, I think we always have it at the back of our minds that eventually our teams are going to lose. You know, you can only keep up so far that eventually you'll suffer that blip in form. Has Liverpool's blip come so early in the season? Now, we are talking about a team that has had so many changes that could pass for a new team. Now, Arne Slot walked into that Liverpool dugout last season and guided them to the Premier League title. A team with which Klopp had finished third with the previous season. A team that previous season were fighting for four different titles. Of course, they were unable to make it, but they were a team in transition. Remember, Ryan Gravenberch, those are just coming. Alexis McAllister, those are just coming. Dominic Szoboszlai, those are just coming. Liverpool were going through their own overhaul of a midfield. Wataru Endo had just come in. Of course, they had missed out on some, sensational targets like Romeo Lavia, Moises Caicedo in that course of rebuild. You look at their forward lines. Cody Gakpo, Luis Diaz. These were still players that had literally more or less just arrived to the team, and Liverpool were in that phase of transition. So that's why Jurgen Klopp was not blamed for not winning, a major title in that season. So Arne Slot comes in. Of course, it's big shoes for him to fill, and he fills them anyway. Exceeds expectations, guides Liverpool to a Premier League title. Is he under pressure to deliver the same title this season? I'm not convinced so, because he delivered it last season. So he has that leverage within him that he has already won just silverware that I think Liverpool fans will understand if he doesn't make it. The only pressure he will be under is that he was able to win it last season without the huge investment of resources that he's managed to be invested in him this season. Of course, twice they've broken their transfer record, bringing in Florian Wirtz from Bayer Leverkusen and bringing in Alexander Isak from Newcastle. Now, let's break it down to those two players. Now, of course, Florian Wirtz has not had the best of a start to his life at Liverpool, but part of that has been in the way they played, in a way. But also, the Premier League is not an easy league to adapt to. Yeah? Look at players like Victor Gyökeres. Look at players like Benjamin Sesko. They are still trying to find their footing. Look at players like Nick Voltmada. They are still trying to find their footing. Yes, they've scored a couple of goals here and there, but they equally are still trying to settle in. Why can't we accommodate the same courtesy to Florian Wirtz? He has yet to click, but we know there is a very, very fine player in there. Alexander Isak, we know he did not have preseason, so he's not been 100% fit. And yet he still has a goal to his name. Yes, it came against a lesser opponent in Southampton at the third round of the EFL Cup. But have we lost hope that he's not going to make it? Are we suddenly thinking just because he's had a couple of not so good games that suddenly he's going to be a flop at Liverpool? I, for one, am not convinced so. I believe that eventually he will find his footing. He will find his 100% of full fitness, and then he will hit that ground running in more ways than we expect, perhaps exceed those very expectations, the very, very high expectations that we already have of him, given that he cost a record £125 million for Liverpool to sign from Newcastle. So then you look at the changes that they have in their backline. Two changes, very significant changes. Milos Kakes at left back and Jeremy Frimpong at right back. Now, you need to go back to the time of Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, including last season when Arne Slot had just come in to assess the impact of Liverpool's fullbacks, the left back and the right back, how they played. Trent Alexander-Arnold, often very crucial in their build-up from that back. He has that long pass, he can switch play from one wing to the other, the set plays and everything he contributed to that team. Sometimes inverting into midfield to provide more cover, to provide a channel for a path of play. And now they do not have that. It's Jeremy Frimpong, who is more or less of a different profile than Alexander Trent Arnold. You go to left back, centre back pairing of Ibrahim Konate and Virgil van Dijk have been accustomed to playing with Andy Robertson for quite some time. And now it's Milos Kakes. Milos Kakes, who has yet to hit his best form, because for me he was a player in my best 11 of the season from last season, at AFC Bournemouth. So suddenly he's come to Liverpool. Of course, it's different pressure. It's a different profile of a team. You're playing for the reigning champions of the Premier League. So that pressure is bound to affect you in one way or the other, So are we suddenly going to think that he's not going to cut it? I believe there is a very, very good player in there. So he's here to settle in. And yet they've still been winning games. You look at that midfield. Now, I do not know whether it is by design that Arne Slot has allowed Ryan Gravenberch to roam that midfield, go back and forth as a box-to-box kind of player, as opposed to being a little reserved, sit back a little bit, and sort of win the ball back, distribute that ball, give it to Dominic Szoboszlai or Alexis McAllister to carry it forward and then get in to play at the likes of Florian Wirtz. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but when you watch Liverpool play, oftentimes Florian Wirtz has had to drift a little deeper in midfield to pick that ball and then carry it forward. More or less like Martin Odegaard often does at Arsenal. And yet I do not think, or at least I'm not yet convinced, that he is that caliber of player who can drift deep into midfield and carry that ball forward. So for me, I would say Arne Slot, look to what you played with last season. Let Ryan Gravenberch, as your holding midfielder, stay put. Do the defensive solidity work and win the ball back. Distribute it among, whether it's because it depends on how they deploy Brian Wirtz. We saw in one of those games being deployed to the left wing. We know predominantly he's been played as the 10, of course, sacrificing one of the midfielders, either it's McAllister or Dominic Szoboszlai. We saw Dominic Szoboszlai being played at right back, and then Jeremy Frimpong played further forward, and those kinds of things. But all that notwithstanding, if Liverpool need to get the best out of Florian Wirtz, he needs to be playing further forward as opposed to being constantly dragged back deep in midfield. Then you look at the forward line. Liverpool have gone through certain changes. Of course, they are without Diego Jota. May his soul rest in peace. You are without Luis Diaz. You are without Darwin Núñez. Even though his contribution wasn't always top notch, he is one that sort of understood the way they played. And now you have Hugo Ekitike, who has had a stellar start to his Liverpool career. You have Alexander Isak, who is not 100% fit. You had Mohamed Salah, who is not yet as electric as he was last season. And of course, as he ages on, his responsibilities are being downgraded in terms of how he helps the team on and off the ball. So all those are changes that Liverpool are having to carry on. So we were accustomed last season to a midfield trio of McAllister, Szoboszlai, and Ryan Gravenberch. And now it's being changed to a two. Sometimes you have Ryan Gravenberch alongside Curtis Jones, or you have Gravenberch and Szoboszlai or McAllister, whatever the swap is, to accommodate Florian Wirtz. So that in itself is a change. Those players need to find chemistry among themselves. We know that the Liverpool defense has struggled and they've been conceding goals. And it is something that we mentioned upon during the course of the summer while we were assessing Liverpool. In any case, Go back to some of those videos and see for yourself. But they brought in a backup center back in Giovanni Leone, and that one has suffered an anterior cruciate ligament injury. His season is as good as done. Not that he was a starter, but it speaks to the overall worries of the team that we've lost that one. Who is going to be our backup? Because Anna Slot can't suddenly say, Ibrahim Konate, you're having a bad run of form, and maybe let's play Virgil van Dijk alongside so and so. Joe Gomez, very good defender, sometimes often injured, And now Giovanni Leone, you've lost him to a long-term injury. You tried to sign McKay, it did not happen. So we cannot cry over spilled milk, in that sort of sense. So, anyways, for me, Liverpool are not a team in crisis. When you look at their games, beat Bournemouth by 4 goals to 2. Of course, the performance of Bournemouth did not reflect the result they got, but the hallmark of champions is winning even when you're not having a so good day. They went to Newcastle, where Newcastle literally dominated affairs in that second half, despite being down to 10 men. But still, Liverpool found a way to win. That winning goal by Riongo Moho. We know that they played against Atletico de Madrid in the UEFA Champions League at Anfield and managed to win by 3 goals to 2. Yes, a late winner by Virgil van Dijk, and of course that late free kick in around the 83rd or 84th minute against Arsenal, and they managed to win. You go to the game against Burnley, they won by a goal to nil. That penalty by Mo Salah. Yes, there have been signs. The signs have been there that Liverpool are not at their best. That this new team, with the many changes that they have, that we have highlighted from the back, from the midfield, and going forward, is bound to affect them in some way. That's why they've not been playing at their very best, and yet they still managed to find a way to win. 6 wins out of the possible 8 games, in as far as the season start is concerned. You tell me that that's a bad report card. 1 victory in the UEFA Champions League, 1 loss. 1 loss in the Premier League and 5 victories. They are still at the summit of the Premier League. 2 points ahead of Arsenal, who have lost the game against their title rivals in Liverpool, and then dropped points against Manchester City. Now, what's to come for Liverpool? Of course, they have some very, very difficult games to come. Over the weekend, on Saturday, they will be up against Chelsea. Not an easy game, given that they are going away to Stamford Bridge, a place where they've not won, I think, in the last 3, including losing there by 3 goals to 1 last season. But at that time, they had already won the Premier League title. They were champions in waiting, so they didn't play under any sort of pressure, or they did not have that desire to, they were not desperate to win it. Then when you wind things back, I think in the other 2 games, they shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw, and that kind of thing. So they do not really do well at Stamford Bridge. Could they drop points? It's very possible. But Chelsea themselves are not in the best of form, really. So Liverpool could fancy themselves to go and have a chance at Stamford Bridge. And we're talking about a Chelsea side that has conceded 3 red cards in their last 3 consecutive fixtures. Against Manchester United to Robert Sanchez, against Brighton and Hove Albion, Trevor Chalobah, and in the UEFA Champions League, in their victory, they go 1-0 against Benfica. Joao Pedro are getting a red card. So you could fancy your chances. After their game against Chelsea, after the international break, they'll be up against Manchester United. That game will be at Anfield. Very, very difficult home game against their arch rivals in Manchester United. But we know that Manchester United are not in the best of form. We know Manchester United is troubles. Those we'll discuss those at great length. Then they will have a game against Brentford. They'll have another game against Aston Villa. Aston Villa have had a poor start to the campaign, despite their 3-1 victory over Fulham over the weekend. And then they will have a game against Manchester City. So that's in the Premier League alone. Of course, in between there, they have a game against Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup. It will be at Anfield, not an easy game. Then, of course, they will have a UEFA Champions League engagement thereabout, I think, in the immediate aftermath of the international break after the game against Manchester United. So it won't be easy, but I do not think suddenly that alarms, bell alarms for crisis at Liverpool should be sounded yet. Yes, they could have a bad spell, as all big teams do, but it shouldn't be, alarming. For example, Real Madrid lost over the weekend by 5 goals to 2 against Atletico de Madrid, but they had won 6 out of 6 until match day 7. Should we say they are a team in crisis just because they got beat badly? I do not want to believe so. Are there things that Liverpool need to work on or to improve on? Of course, and Slot has some homework to do in terms of getting that team to play one as a team, one to trust that there are so many stars, but not everybody is going to shine. You know, that if Mo Salah is to shine, then Florian Wirtz may not shine as much. Maybe Isak may not shine as much. Or if Isak shines as much, then Mo Salah may have to sort of take a backseat to be number 2 to him and that kind of thing. So there are things they need to work on. But I do not think that they are a team in crisis, because in any case, their report card, based on results, is not one that should be causing us any concerns whatsoever. Let's just wait and see what there is in store for Liverpool, but do not write them off. While my prediction was that Arsenal will win the Premier League title, and I still stand by that prediction, but I continuously to say that the virtue of the fact that they are the reigning champions, Liverpool are still favorites. And I've given those reasons before. If you're not sure what the reasons are, go to the channel. Under the video section, you'll see, actually on the channel, the pinned video, you see my predictions for the 2025-2026 Premier League season. Do let me know what your thoughts are under this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye and stay blessed for now.